Do the panellists recognise our government as a Labour government? You have to think about that question a bit, don't you? Because I know what John means by that. Now, and sadly, we haven't got a Labour representative on the panel tonight. Helen, let's start with you, Helen Morgan. Do you understand what the questioner means by that?
Well, my guess would be, are they protecting the most vulnerable people, which is what you would hope to see from this government, and I think hopefully what they would have promised previously. And I think my concern is that they've made a number of mistakes which mean that they aren't necessarily achieving that. So particularly with cancelling the winter fuel payment, I think that's particularly problematic for pensioners who are, just over that pension credit threshold. That's affected a lot of people in North Shropshire very significantly. And I think we've seen some poor decisions on the NIC hike as well, because that's going to hit, as it stands at the moment, healthcare providers, social care, local government, places where you would hope this type of government would be protecting, and I'm not sure that they are doing that.
And of course, we've also got a follow-up question here from Colin, who says, in the light of the decision by Labour today not to pay the Waspy women compensation as it would be unaffordable, quotes, do the panel think that this rejection could be extended to other claims, such as those of the sub-postmasters, for the same reason? And I guess, Tom Skinner, you will have seen the responses from Keir Starmer when he was leader of the opposition on the Waspy women, where he was very keen to support their cause. And of course, today it's been announced that they're not going to pay out anything to the Waspy women. So again, that feeds into John's initial question.
Yeah, I think it really highlights that being in opposition is significantly easier than being in government. And as Labour are finding out, there's a lot of social media videos going around with Angela Rayner and Yvette Cooper being very, very forthright on the Waspy women issue. And the decision is really hard because it's very, very expensive. And there's a reason why... 10
billion.
There's a reason why the Conservative government didn't take this sort of easier, probably political decision and refund this money or give this money. Because £10 billion is a huge amount of money. So it's a difficult choice. And to go back to is this a Labour government question, I think the challenge that Starmer is facing is that they spent the whole of the election campaign not putting a vision to the country. They were the sort of hoping, this Ming Vase strategy, hoping that they would gather votes by default by basically not being the Conservative Party, which was hugely effective in terms of the election, but is now causing them a lot of problems in government because they're struggling to communicate what it is they actually stand for, either to their base voters or the wider public.
I agree. But I think when it comes to the question, we have to ask ourselves, which sort of Labour? Do we mean, Tony Blair Labour? Do we mean Jeremy Corbyn Labour? For many of the supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, even though he massively lost, I think they're absolutely frustrated. He did garner a lot of support for people that were maybe seen as disadvantaged in society. When we look at the two-child cap policy, they're very silent on that. They're very silent on leasehold. They're very silent on, again, the winter fuel.
They haven't been silent on two-child cap. They've actually refused to reverse it.
Well, they also haven't been silent on leasehold, have they?
Well, in the way that people would think that they would come out with strength to say, you know what, we are sick to death. I think people who fundamentally and historically support Labour, even if they didn't support Jeremy Corbyn, they were hoping for this whole new government change. That was their slogan, change. But it doesn't feel like a massive change. We can see that many people have coined it, Tory-blue-light. So in response to the question, I think many historical voters do not feel that this is a Labour government because they're not trying to, establish policies that would be for those who are disadvantaged. So I think many are going to struggle, and I think how they've approached various situations has not helped them and will not keep their original voters.
Chris?
Well, I think they've certainly made tomorrow's job easy for picture desk editors. I can just imagine Keir Starmer dressed as Scrooge on the front page of his few newspapers. But it's just really bizarre. So you're a new government. Times are hard, so you need to set a positive agenda going forward. What do? The first thing you do is you tell, 1 million pensioners in Scotland, about 12 million across the UK, that you're no longer getting your winter fuel payment. Last week, Starmer said...
to be fair, it was only 9 million.
Oh, well, I think 10 million across the whole of the UK, including Scotland, England and Wales, obviously, because the figures get aggregated. Okay. But I'll defer to your experience. Last week...
I think it's 12 million that get the benefit at the moment, and 3 million will still continue getting the benefit. That's where the 9 million comes.
Last week, he seemed to suggest that nurses have to work harder. if they want to get a pay rise, because that's going to be about productivity going forward. So these don't sound like the sort of things you would traditionally expect to hear from a Labour government. So it's broken promises on this, because, you know, as Tom says, social media is full of videos of Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer, and practically every single Labour candidate saying they'll get justice for Wasby women. So the only change that Labour seem to be offering is shortchange on the promises.
I think Angela Rayner was really strong. She said that the Conservative government had stolen the money from the Waspy women.
Yeah.
It was a pretty strong line to then decide you're not going to back that up.
Even as a leader, there doesn't seem to be, when he is being interviewed, I think what the traditional Labour voter wants to see is some empathy, some understanding for various people in society. And when he's questioned on these things, he just seems a bit stone-faced. And I think, like I said, for the Labour voter, I think there's a lot of disappointment there when it comes to Keir Starmer.
I think historically, maybe not so recently, the public thought the Conservative Party were mean, but at least competent. And whereas the Labour Party...
Yeah, that argument's gone for a
I don't think anybody thought
maybe
that
not
they
the
were
last,
competent.
not the last couple of years.
I think that's why they did so badly in the election this year. You know, they had been...
No, but traditionally
that was the
Traditionally,
sort of
maybe,
pitch.
but I think they've lost that reputation.
Oh, certainly.
I think what Labour are in danger of doing is kind of cleansing that reputation. I think that's the issue. I mean, there's no doubt that Labour have inherited a mess, and I'm not here to argue on behalf of them, because Liberal Democrats were fully in support of the Waspy women. But there's no doubt...
Where would you find the 10 billion from then?
Well, 10 billion is the kind of the maximum amount if you pay everyone out at a flat rate, isn't it? And what the Ombudsman suggested was that there was further consultation to be done to kind of find the number. So without knowing what the number is, it's pretty difficult to say how you'd pay for it. But I think in the context...
Sorry, that's weasel words, Helen, as you know.
In the context of £130 billion of borrowing in a financial year, you know, a smaller number is something that needs to be considered, because you shouldn't be balancing the books, you know, sorting out the injustice of Conservative incompetence on the backs of the Waspy women.
Yeah, but
it would be
Lib
more
Dems were in
expensive,
government
though,
for
wouldn't
5 years and they didn't do anything about this. I mean, this was first proposed in a 1993 white paper, so there was plenty of time for the Lib Dems to encourage the Conservative government if they wanted to do anything about it.
But were you suggesting like a bespoke? Because the reason why they did do the flatline is because they wouldn't be able to have literally the manpower or the staffing to be able to have that bespoke level of careful curation of who should receive what. So it probably would end up being more if they had to do that. So that's why they suggested the flat line.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ombudsman was not, what's the word, definitive about how you would make this compensation work, and I think there would need to be further consultation on it. But just saying that you're not going to give them anything when the Ombudsman has said that they are victims of maladministration, I think is probably not good enough.
But how can you, I mean, even if it isn't 10 billion, say it's 5 billion, I think it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask as to where that money would come from. Because, I mean, you have, I won't say the joy of being in opposition, because I don't think anybody regards opposition as joyful, but you can say what you like in opposition, can't you? And just say, oh, well, of course we would support them. I mean, that's what Labour did, and it's come back to bite them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've suggested...
That'll save you £205 billion. I'm not sure what the Lib Dems' position on that is. Previously, it was maybe you would go to 2 votes or 3 votes. I think at the last election, you managed to get through the campaign without actually having a coherent defence policy.
No, we absolutely backed the nuclear deterrent in our conference in spring 2023, I think. Long time ago now.
Politics is about choices.
No, we have to keep it.
But I think the point really about the compensation is that firstly, we've offered the Labour Party lots of different ideas about where we'd raise that money from. So, for example, reversing the cuts to the bankers' taxes. And also, I think in our manifesto, we committed to say for this particular item that we would borrow for it, because it's a one-off item, it's not a continuing revenue spend.
And then you introduce the possibility of a means test state pension, because you want to means test who gets Waspy justice.
Well, we've always supported pensioners. We introduced the triple lock when
what you're saying is you would means test who gets compensation. So
I think we said we would do further consultation on that, because the Ombudsman's report wasn't definitive about how that compensation would be paid. But I think the key point here is that you have a situation where the Labour government say they haven't got any money to do anything. We know that's the case because of the situation we were in before the election. And now we're saying these women who have been found by an ombudsman to have been victims of maladministration aren't entitled to any kind of compensation whatsoever. That doesn't seem to be very fair to me.